Champions Cup, folks, is underway for 2022-2023. What about the attendances? I've seen numerous news articles in some ways being rather critical of some of the teams, fans not getting out there to support the teams. But is it all that bad? We'll go through the attendances plus the capacities, some possible reasons for attendances being good and bad. And you guys can let us know your thoughts. I should say, a big caveat before I start is that these numbers for the attendances I've found from the Rugby Inside Line, which is a rugby news Twitter account. Couldn't find them from the competition official page. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully these numbers are more or less correct. I've seen some people calling out the numbers for being a bit off, but often it does depend on which side of the stadium the camera is on and where the people are sitting. But anyway, we'll go through them and you guys can have any thoughts. Start with the ones who aren't really getting criticised. Munster, from my experience of limited years watching the Champions Cup, Munster fans love a European night. So almost 22,000, more than 21,000 people get out there to watch Munster take on Toulouse. Now I should say Toulouse is a pretty good draw. That's a big team. Munster fans know that's a big team, and 85% of the stadium is full, so it looks pretty good on camera. Right, I've seen Munster fans travel to numerous grounds around Europe since watching the Champions Cup, and often I feel like they outnumber the home teams at times, because Munster fans tend to get out and support the team. Not a sellout, but still pretty good on what was seemingly a pretty cold night, but that's pretty good numbers, man, more than 20,000. La Rochelle, their 100% record continues. La Rochelle fans always just seem to get out there, and they seem to understand the benefits of having a really great atmosphere at a ground. A lot of grounds can be pretty quiet, but not La Rochelle's ground, always very boisterous. And in the days when there wasn't as much to compete for people's entertainment attention, you could have less effort put on the atmosphere at the ground. I feel like that's not the case these days. There's too many things competing with going to live sports. And with the picture quality on TVs, what it is these days, prices of beers and whatnot at the stadium, you do need to have something to entice fans to make the effort to go to the ground. La Rochelle seems to do that really well. Maybe something a lot of other teams could learn from, but it's not always that easy to replicate. So these are your top two. Munster's top by attendance. La Rochelle's top by percentage of capacity complete, and then if you swap them around, like they're first and second both ways. So Munster's second for capacity, first for total, and La Rochelle's first capacity, second for total. So there you go. They're doing really well. Racing 92, no one's really talking about them too much. They didn't play at their regular ground. They played out in Le Havre. More than 14,000 people got out there. 56% capacity is not that flash. So it would certainly be a different atmosphere at a 56% capacity, 14,000 compared to 100% capacity, 16,000. That's just the way it goes. But like I said, no one's really talking about them too much. Clermont, 13,000, almost 14,000, 71%. Pretty good. I think it's interesting that 3 of the top 4 teams for top attendances in this first round are French teams. Maybe speaks to the support the French teams are getting. And I should say, I've never been to any games in Europe or South Africa or anything. I've been to a game in Australia, and I've been to obviously loads of games in New Zealand. From my experience of away fans, the French probably left the biggest impression when I went to the World Cup in 2011. Not the final, obviously, but the pool game between the All Blacks and the French. The French fans were something else. Very boisterous. I thought the stand that they were in, there was one section of a stand which was all French fans. I literally thought it was going to collapse, because New Zealand fans, we tended to sit there and clap, whereas the French fans were like bouncing off the walls. So there you go. 3 of the top 4 are French. The Sharks, with more than 12,000, are one of the teams copping a lot of grief. And I think it's because of this number, 24% capacity. So not even a quarter of the ground full. Now, the Sharks obviously suffer what we get a lot in Super Rugby still, is that why doesn't anyone go to the games? Basically, I think the grounds are too big. They're no longer fit for purpose. Now, admittedly, back in the day, Super Rugby grounds did used to get full. Like, the Sharks did used to be able to get, more than 40,000 people to a Super Rugby game. So did the Blues. We used to be able to sell out Eden Park for Super Rugby. Not for a long time, though. So, it does look pretty bad on camera, and especially because it's in summer in South Africa right now, and the side of the ground that the camera points to is the sunny side. And who wants to sit in the baking sun? Probably not that many people, so most people are on the same side of the ground from what I could see as the camera. So it looks even worse on camera, sadly. But from some crowd shots I saw, seemed to be a pretty good atmosphere going on the side of the ground that had most of the fans. So yeah, 12,000 ain't bad, man. For a new competition in South Africa, I think that's doing all right. But like I said, the stadiums, same in New Zealand, man. They're just not really fit for purpose anymore because you're not going to get 50,000 people to a Super Rugby game or a Champions Cup game or URC game or whatever. Gloucester's the first team to drop below 10,000 in terms of fans. Attendance of 57%. Kind of on a par with what I think Gloucester usually get. I looked up their last Premiership game when I think they played Newcastle and they had just over 11,000 fans. So to get 9,000 against Bordeaux, it's kind of much of a muchness. It's not a huge change. It's kind of decent without being spectacular. Sharsies with over 8,000. As a team that gets criticised a lot on social media for having like no fans, but 80% capacity is a pretty sweet number. That'll be the third overall. So not the biggest ground, maybe a ground which is more fit for purpose in terms of the expected attendance. So yeah, playing Edinburgh, I guess, maybe helps because you can get some travelling fans. But yeah, 8,000. The Bulls, lowest in terms of the overall capacity of the ground filled up, 7,000 fans, which is actually up from one of their more recent URC games when I think they played the Ospreys. They had like 5,000. So in context, it's you know, some extra fans. You know, I think they played Lyon as well, right? So I mean, it's a new competition, as I said, for South African fans. So it's going to take a while for fans to get used to which team is playing what style or which players they've got. You know, this is a French team, which I would imagine, if you're a casual Bulls fan, do you know much about Lyon? Probably not. I don't know that much about Lyon. I watch a lot of rugby. Don't watch much of top 14, admittedly, but yeah, compared to like if you'd asked a Bulls fan a few years ago, I don't know, about the Highlanders or the Sunwolves, they'd probably have at least a general idea. So it is going to take people a while to get used to that. But obviously, 14%, it just looks dead empty, doesn't it? Sale, nobody's really criticising Sale, despite the fact they are one of the bottom teams in terms of the attendance. But over half of the ground was full because it's a small ground. It doesn't look that bad. So 55%. For them, the Ospreys is one of the teams copping a bit of stick. Similar attendance to Sale, but 31%. And again, I think a lot of the fans sit on the same side as the camera. It just doesn't look as good, does it? Although, admittedly, the Welsh teams haven't been doing that well in the last wee while. So the attendances have kind of suffered. It's the same in New Zealand. When the teams are winning, they get more fans. That's just the way that goes. And then London Irish, again, one of the teams that is getting stick. It seems to be the teams that have gotten like around about 30% or less that are copping the most flack on social media just because you can see so many empty seats. The teams which got 50% or above, nobody really seemed to care. So, yeah, 5,000 fans getting out there for the London Irish guys. It's comparable to what they get in the Premiership. I think they had over 6,000 when they played a recent Premiership game. So, yeah, 32%, as I said, just doesn't look that good on camera. Now, there's probably a few factors we do need to keep into consideration. Oh, they didn't have the numbers for the cast game, by the way. The Football World Cup is on, and there's a lot of people who like rugby and football, soccer. So, a lot of these games either were clashing with or close to clashing with some of the football. So, it's potentially to be expected that some fans, while the World Cup is on, are going to be paying less attention to rugby. That's one thing I would say. Also, it was pretty bloody cold in some of the areas. Like the London Irish game on the Friday, like the ref was telling the players to hurry up because it's cold, which is not something you usually hear. You usually hear them hurry up because we're supposed to be playing rugby, not because I'm cold, I want to move. He was blowing his fingers, Andrea Priati. Like, yeah, it was bloody cold. So I think it was -5 or something. So some people who were maybe considering going to the game looked at the weather outside and went, bugger that, I'm watching it at home on TV. And sometimes it's kind of hard to blame them. And like I mentioned, for the South African guys, it is a new competition against more teams which you maybe haven't heard of. So I do think that kind of thing needs to build. Like, if you're a South African fan, you're just getting used to the Welsh teams, the Italian teams, the Scottish teams, and Irish teams. You're getting an idea of, okay, this team is strong, this team's kind of a medium team, this team's a weak team. If you chuck in the top 14 and the Premiership teams into that, it's a whole bunch of kind of relearning to do. Like, okay, so Toulouse is strong. Oh, Toulon is actually different from Toulouse. Like, my dad is the ultimate, I would say, kind of casual rugby fan for European club rugby, because he watches all the New Zealand rugby and he'll catch the odd European game, but he'll get Leicester and Leinster confused because he doesn't watch them week in, week out. It's just one of those things. So yeah, there we go, folks. What do you guys reckon? Are there other reasons you think the attendances were maybe not that flash? I think in most cases they kind of make sense. Like Munster's attendance is up from their last game against Connacht, because you're playing Toulouse. It's a big team. It's a big European game, as opposed to Connacht, who you get to see kind of every year. Like I said, the Bulls' attendance was actually up. London Irish's one was down on a cold Friday night. So the Sharks were one of the top teams in terms of attendance, but less than a quarter of the ground full, so it doesn't look as good on camera. What do you guys reckon? Do you think the attendances will bump up next week? You got like Leicester Tigers will probably be the top Premiership team in terms of attendance, I reckon, because they always tend to get pretty good attendances. But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.